everybody. Welcome to another edition of Mr. Parker's Neighborhood. I'm Mr. Parker, and today I have another guest, another family member in the neighborhood. I'm going to just slowly introduce him. His name is, listen carefully, Gabriel Acevedo. Dr. Gabe, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, my friend. How are you doing today? Man, it's so good to catch up after so long. Getting old, Cecil. We getting old.
You know. All right. Before we get started, we play a little game with the viewers, and here we go, viewers. Your time to guess what it is my guest does. This should be good. All right. A, is he a father figure for a group home? B, a entrepreneur? C, a jazz musician? D, a top flight engineer? Or E, none of the above? All right, don't even worry about it. Keep your guess to yourself because you probably won't be right. Dr. Gabe, will you tell them what it is that you actually do, sir?
Wow, that is fantastic. I tell you what, Cecil, I wish I were the jazz musician. I wish that was the right answer. I wish that was the right answer. So, well, it's a little bit, it's not that complicated, but somewhat complicated because I have a new role. Okay. So I work at Yale University, where I am primarily in charge of data analytics in the strategic analysis department. So I work in strategic planning, institutional research here at Yale University. And then I also teach at the University of New Haven in the psychology department. So this is a new role for me. I've been here about 2 years. And so quickly before that, I was a professor at the University of Texas in San Antonio for a long time, and then decided to make a move here about 2 years ago.
All right, all right. So now that's the easy stuff. That's the as I say, that's the setup, and that is the tone of which we're going to start. But after all the preliminary stuff, here we go. Gabe, what's going on, my big brother? How are you?
You, man, my friend, you are making my day, man. All I can say is like life is way too short. It's been way too long, and I got a lot of really great memories from back in St. Louis.
Man, thank you for coming on today. Take a little time out. Now we're gonna start off, go back, and where you were originally from, St. Louis. Lead us to where we go. Tell us a little bit.
So not originally from St. Louis. My parents are they both passed, but my parents are Colombian. They were from Colombia, South America. City on the coast in the water called Cartagena, which is a big, if you've never been there, you got to get there. Got to get there. It's a party capital of the world. It's a beautiful beach city in Colombia. And I lived in Miami for a long time and then moved to St. Louis around 8th grade. Okay. So I moved to St. Louis to live with my sister. I used to live in Glasgow Village, right there in Glasgow Village, and then went to Riverview Gardens where, we all met. I was in the marching band. And then from there, I don't know, us old folks might remember I was a drummer, played the drums, and then I had some great friends made some great friends, incredible musicians from University City.
University City, yeah.
What was that high school? What was that high school there? U City, right?
Yeah, that's it.
U City had a great jazz band, and me and some of those cats from that high school had a band called Vision in St. Louis. Very popular band. We used to play at Laclede Landing. Played a lot of that old R&B. Played a lot of new R&B. Luther Vandross, for anything from Luther to Earth, Wind, and Fire. And then we became Cool School somewhere along the line, and made a couple of records for Capitol Records, got a record deal, toured the country. And so anyway, but my years at, go ahead.
Okay. We're gonna play with that for a minute. So when you came to St. Louis and say in 8th grade from Miami,
8th grade
came there and got into the band. What made you get into the Riverview band? What made you join the band?
That's a good. I was just lucky. My parents were immigrants, Colombian immigrants. They didn't have education, and we lived in a very poor section of Miami with a lot of other immigrants from Cuba and Haiti, Haitians and Colombians, few Colombians, but a lot of Cubans, a lot of Haitians, Nicaraguans. And just at a very young age, honestly, my old man picked up a trash toy drum set. He would go around and he picked up a little trash toy drum set, brought it home from somebody's trash. And I loved it. And so I started playing the drums when I was real little. Like I was like tiny, 6, 7. I started beating on drums, beating on, anything I get my hands on. Anyway, so I stayed with it. So by the time I was in middle school, I was actually a pretty good little drummer, and I knew it's what I wanted to do. So as soon as I got to like middle school, I was interested in the bands, and I think in my first middle school in St. Louis, I forgot what it was, or maybe I was already in 9th grade, but either way, as soon as I got to St. Louis and started going to school, I just knew I wanted to play the drums, and Riverview had a really good marching band because, we had a football team and we had a marching band. I remember the band leader was Mr. Smith.
Yeah, that's it.
Mr. Smith, right? Remember Mr. Smith?
Yeah.
And the principal, Mr. Chickering,
Yep.
had a daughter, Jenny, who played in the band, and so we all got to know each other, and so I immediately just joined the marching band and the jazz band, and just enjoyed all the music stuff that we did at Riverview Gardens back then.
Yeah, and like I said, when we met, like I said, you were a senior, and that was my freshman year, and you came in there, and I think it was the first band rehearsal, marching band rehearsal, that one of those early morning band rehearsals, and we were like, being freshmen, we were like, oh man, what's going on here? And I think you and Leo
Carter,
you and Leo was the drum major. He was a leader,
the drum major,
yeah,
chart.
You, Leo, and Laurie, the trumpet player. You and Laurie came out laughing and joking. We're like, oh man, who these guys? And they're like, all right, these are your section leaders. We're like, okay, wait a minute. The girl, what? Is there a problem? You're like, oh, she's my. You're like, yeah, don't be fooled. But I mean, you guys showed us at that point in time, and I think you even said it to us, we are a family. This band is now your family. So while you're in the band, you have a family. So let's act like it. We're like, okay. And I mean, it was just a beautiful thing to watch you guys do. And the first time we had the marching band, and we had a break between marching, and the drum line, you guys got together, start playing, and we were sitting there, and you brought out they brought out the quints, and we were like, who is that? And you would, I mean, it was like, who's and I mean, you played, and you made us all fall in love with, okay. And then when it came to marching, it was Normandy. And they're like, oh yeah. We're like, what is that? And you 5, 6, 7, 8. Tack, 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 tack.
Those are some.
We're like, yeah. We're like, well, why are we calling this Normandy? Why was it called Normandy?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't Normandy a high school, right?
Yeah.
Normandy High School, and I think it was actually it was a beat. It was one of their beats.
Okay,
and that goes way back. And I just think we kind of heard Normandy's drum. Normandy had an incredible marching band.
Yes, sir.
And their drum line, I don't know it's a long time ago, but Normandy had a wicked drum line.
Yeah.
And we were competitors, but we were respectful too.
Yeah.
We had this beat, and we kind of swiped it and added our thing to it. But you got to give respect, man. To give respect, we said we're going to take that beat, but we're going to call it Normandy. Be respectful to Normandy, right? So, and I'm sure they stole a beat from us now and then down the road, but yeah. So that's how that came about. And it was from them, and we added something to it, but we wanted to give respect by keeping the name Normandy.
And like I said, in that whole growing up time for us, like I said, you have fellas like Richard Scaife, who later on became the leader of the percussion section. I mean, we had the band. I mean, it was just a great feeling to be a part of the band. And when you got there, like I said, you came in, you said you playing to get to the point where you were then, as far as growing up, like I say, in St. Louis now, the adjustment, was there a great adjustment coming from Miami to St. Louis and getting
Yeah. Yeah, because I was a kid, I was young, and in Miami, well, we were all poor, but we were all we were mainly Hispanic people, right?
Right.
We were a lot of Hispanic people, and everybody spoke Spanish, and so and Haitian kids were, the Haitian kids were dark skinned, everybody just thought they were black, right?
Right.
And
Right.
then we had us who were Colombian and we just were Hispanic. And then it was interesting because St. Louis, my biggest adjustment was that really there weren't that many Hispanics.
Right.
There were like a lot of there were some white kids and there were African American kids. And there weren't that, back then at least, there weren't that many Hispanic kids. So I was kind of caught in these two worlds, like,
Right.
wow, I'm not white, but I'm not black. And I'm like this kind of one guy in the middle here. But it was music that just connected me to everybody, right? It was just finding music and then joining the drum line. And the drum line was, it was mainly African American kids and some white kids, but I remember we had some great snare drummers. Mike, I think his name was Mike, he was older when I got there. So
Okay.
you didn't know him.
Right.
Mike was like one of the older guys when I got there as a freshman.
Okay.
And I remember we had a little drum off. We drummed off, and he was like, "Yeah, you're supposed to be all good, and you're a freshman." And I was like, "Well, let's go. Let's go. Let's get them snare." And we battled. We had a battle. We became great friends. So anyway, so it was through that I just kind of like had to make an adjustment because so much of America is about race and and all our past but what was really nice about that band is that a lot of people were able to put that all aside and just worry about the music, and so I think that was the biggest adjustment. I just came from Miami, which was more of like a Hispanic Cuban kind of town where everybody spoke Spanish, to being in a new place where it was more like it was just a different vibe altogether. But it was a great experience for me, and I just made a lot of friends that I probably wouldn't have made if I stayed in Miami. And then of course we'll talk about that later, but then that led to playing in bands and playing music and really starting to get into like R&B and jazz and James Brown, a lot of the old R&B stuff. I don't know if that would have happened if I would have stayed in Miami.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, and coming through, I mean, growing up and doing, like I said, teaching the other drummers like Tony, Brian, and Rich. And I mean, it was just the fact of watching you guys work together and you were trying to teach them. And then when it came closer, especially when it came close to competition time, it was like, I mean, that being that we're freshmen, we have never been in that kind of situation. When band competition time came, it was a different level of everything.
Oh, absolutely. Right. I don't know if you remember, we would I think we went to Tennessee a lot. We went to this big Knoxville, I think, some big competitions. And yeah, it got intense. It was a more pressure environment because you were judged, you were judged by the judges and you wanted to win. Oh man, I'm not gonna lie. And I was, I did shit. Oh, I don't think I should cuss. I don't want to cuss, but I can cuss. It's okay.
Yeah, you okay? It's okay.
I mean, I was a kid, and I did shit in high school that I don't encourage anybody to do, and things that you can't get away with now. But I remember during preparing for one of those, you might not have been there yet, but I think maybe I was a junior or something. And we were preparing for a competition. Like you said, it was very intense. And I actually remember getting really mad at somebody for screwing around. And it was early in the morning and we're all tired. And I remember throwing a drum at somebody. Throwing a drum across the room and he had to like, damn, had to duck. And I was like, man, everybody's working so hard to learn this shit. And if one of us is off, it's, that's why we have to do this. That's why we work so hard. Everybody agreed to go home for the weekend, practice this part so we can all come back the snare line and have it down. And you didn't do and then he tried to give me a bunch of excuses and I threw a drum. It's like, my God, what if that drum would have hit this poor kid on the head, right? But yeah, it's like you said, Chisa, in marching band, it's all about being in sync, right? And so it's like it's like a life lesson in a way, right? That when you work as a group,
Mhm.
any group that is successful, basketball team, football team, a team in a corporate, like here, I work with a team of people to get it. If you're not in sync, you know, it's not going to work. And so that's what I learned in marching band, you know, is that you have to be in sync. And when those competitions came up, that's when like the pump the volume up. Everybody was really fired up to do a good job. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, like I say, and I mean, and like you just said, it was amazing that through that little band situation, you're not thinking as a kid that it's that important until later on when you realize that, yeah, if one person in the drum line is on the upbeat and the other one's on the downbeat, you're off. And it sounds bad, but just that one person's like, I don't make a real difference, but yes, you do. And which is a part of life, to how one person can change a whole lot of things in somebody's life for the good or the bad. And I mean, it was just growing. I mean, like I said, so when we went to, I said, we went to Washington, Missouri. That was one of the biggest competitions. I think that might have been our first competition we ever went to as freshmen. And you guys were like, now this is how you understand what it is to be in a marching band. And I mean, that was the biggest thing we ever experienced. As far as you go, what was one of the best competitions you were ever involved in, if you can remember?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, I think I remember that when we would go to different parts of Missouri, right? So up there by, I think by Columbia and Rolla, Jeff City.
Yeah.
But I think going to Tennessee, because in Tennessee there were bands from all over the country.
Yeah.
And I think what I remember, I mean, we were good, you know, we were good, and we had a good marching band. But then I realized that's when I started to realize, like, we weren't a very rich school, right?
Right.
And that's when I looked around and I saw these like really rich schools, like from Jeff City, from Rolla, and they had like trucks, carrying all their gear around. We threw our shit in the back of a bus, right? You know, I mean, we just threw all our drums in the back of a school bus, you know, like, fuck. Oh, sorry.
You all right?
We threw our gear in the back of a bus, and like, sometimes if our snare drums broke, we would tape them up. We tried to polish them. We tried to polish them, but damn, there's only so much you can do, you know, they were dented. And then we went to like, and I remember my first time going to like a big competition where there was these, and unfortunately, you know, because race is a part of, you know, we'll talk more, but I ended up being a sociologist. I ended up getting my PhD and majoring in sociology, where I've done a lot of research on race and inequality and poverty. But as a kid, I realized, oh man, like these rich schools, you know, they're not only rich, but there's like, they ain't no black people, they ain't no Hispanics. It's like they're white. It's like a bunch, and they're good. I mean, they're good. It's not like they can play. But that's when I realized, you know, that's when I started to realize at these big marching festivals, like, about inequality and racism and prejudice, and realizing that, wow, you know, our school, like, everybody works really hard, but man, we don't have the resources like some of these schools. Like, I remember seeing a drum line, I don't know if it was Rolla or Jeff City, and all their snare drums were like covered in this like black shell, like a black, it said Yamaha.
I remember that.
Damn. And we had like maybe 6 or 7 snare drummers. I think they had like 12. Like, I was like, damn, you know, that's money. You know, it takes a lot of money. So yeah. So I think it was somewhere like either in Tennessee, one of those big marching festivals where the bands were massive and the drum lines were massive. And that's what I realized, man, some of these schools just got so much money that they can do all this. So, but hey, man, but one thing's for sure, we took what we had and we made the best of it.
That's what I was about to say. That's what I was about to say, as far as that whole, I mean, because I remember one time, it had to be it was another competition that came up, and you were like, all right, look, we've seen everybody, we know that everybody has the best and the shiniest, but they got to play it just like we do. So
that's right.
As long as our sound is good, it doesn't even matter. And I mean, that was the motivational piece of understanding that it's not how it looks, it's what you do with it.
That's right. Yep. Yeah, and I think the judges often said that, because the judges would stand up there in the little thing, and a lot of times they would talk into a tape recorder.
Yeah.
And we were able to listen to it, and I remember judges saying that kind of thing. They would say things like, well, they don't have a big drum line, but what they do have, they make it work.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was a big learning period, that I took for the rest of my life. The lessons I learned in the marching band, for sure.
Now, last thing about this. Now, remember, around the end of high school, your senior year, around that last performance, all of a sudden there came a slight change in how things got judged, because before the competition, it was always that military straight, and something happened to where either HBCU got involved in the competition or normally made a competition, and what they did was a HBCU relax. I mean, it was an up-to-date song, and we were like, whoa, they're doing that now, and it was a switch. Do you remember that?
I do. I mean, and I think that a lot of that really comes down to the band leader and what the band leader's vision is. And Mr. Smith was a wonderful man, and he was a wonderful teacher, and he was a good person, and really had a huge impact in my life.
Yeah.
But he was a more traditional,
Right.
musical leader, right? So I think a lot of what we did was actually more of a traditional approach to marching bands.
Okay.
It was even just almost brought in some classical, which was great. It was great for my training.
Right.
But I think somewhere along the line, Normandy had band directors that just came from a different background.
Right.
And so they were coming much more from historically Black colleges and how their marching bands are.
Right. Yeah.
And you can still see that to this day, right? You can go watch like the Ohio State's marching band.
Yeah.
And they're doing a much more traditional. It's good. There's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
But you go see Grambling's marching band, and you're going to get just a completely different feel, right? It's sort of like the difference between, it might be the difference between, what people think of classical music, from European classical music, Mozart, Beethoven, and I love that music too. But that's completely different from saying, bebop jazz from New Orleans, right? The old bebop jazz that originated in New Orleans, which is, it's more rhythmic, right? It's driven around rhythmic structures that are still very complicated. And it's just two different forms of music. And then of course, finally, like the historically Black colleges and what their marching band started to integrate was a much more movement, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't just about how you play, it's also about how everybody's moving.
Right.
And while traditional marching bands were marching right in straight lines, which is hard to do, don't get me wrong, that's just hard to do. Historically Black colleges, not only were they moving in straight lines, but they started to move their bodies and they were dancing.
Yeah.
Right. Man, and I remember seeing a show, I don't know if it was Normandy or maybe it was a real drum line, like more like a drum corps,
Right.
That was performing at this show. And I never saw snare drummers swing their snare drums around. Like they were swinging them while they were playing them.
Right.
And I was like, shit, damn. So, I think it's just a different approach, And then I kind of, every now and then on YouTube, I see high school drum lines now doing things that are amazing. Just amazing how talented these youngsters are playing nowadays. It's incredible, the stuff that they do.
Yeah. And like I said, so after you graduate, you later go on and you're still playing a little bit around. And then we hear that, I think it's our senior year, we hear that, hey, Gabe's band made a record. Huh? Gabe's playing with a band. Like, Wow. So can you tell us the name of the band and what was going on at that point in time?
Sure. Yeah. So, you know, when I got out of high school, I it's probably fair to say I had three options. You know, like a lot of us wealthy, you know, and I'm, you know, I love money like everybody else, but you know, often, you know, poor Americans, low income Americans, we just often have less options, especially when we're young, right? We have wealthy people have more options. So when I graduated from Riverview, I was either going to go in the Army. I could have gone to college because I was pretty good at music and I could have probably applied for a music scholarship. Or I was going to join a band. And I was just blessed in life that I ran into these young cats from University City, U City area.
Mhm.
The guitar player lived right across from East St. Louis. Still he was best man at my wedding, Dee, who still plays around St. Louis. What do they call? Oh, what's his little band called? I'll think about it in a minute. But they're very popular in St. Louis. And so I joined that band and we were back then called Vision.
Okay.
The band was called Vision and we were playing Laclede Landing. We would play a lot of big private parties and it was amazing because they took a chance on me. And what I mean by that is they were all straight up R&B musicians, right? They were some of the best musicians I've ever been around, but they grew up on James Brown, Earth, Wind and Fire, all really like just the best of the best R&B music at that time. And I was a rock and roll drummer, right? So I kind of was more into like the rock and roll stuff, but they saw that I was really into it and they saw that I was serious about music. So they took a chance on me and let me be their drummer. And let me tell you, that wasn't easy. Them brothers didn't mess around. And I made a lot of mistakes. And they were like, man, if you don't figure out how to groove and start to shuffle and stop playing so white, no, everything you play is just too straight. You know, you got to learn to shuffle. You know, black music is about the shuffle. You're a great rock drummer, but rock and roll is like a train, just going straight at you. You got to get into that. You got to vibe like you got to groove. So they introduced me to James Brown's great drummer, Clyde Stubblefield, and Earth, Wind and Fire's drummer, you know, just all the great R&B music, you know. And so Vision, I stayed with them for years and we started to travel. We would play colleges. And then anyway, to make a long story short, we ended up going to Minneapolis.